Bleach has a vast array of characters, with several of them receiving deep backstories that make you really fall in love with them. Within Bleach, there's a particular mad scientist who loves conducting sadistic experiments on his victims. I'm of course referring to Mayuri Kurotsuchi. His contributions through his inventions and gadgets have immensely advanced the Soul Society, helping them in various fields of research, battle, as well as communication. Mayuri has a unique appearance, with his face paint being very reminiscent of the Joker, as well as his eccentric changes of his headgear and his gold-plated teeth. Mayuri is undeniably one of Kubo's most iconic characters, and it should come as no surprise that Mayuri is in fact one of Kubo's favorite characters. He is known across the fandom for his disturbing experiments, something that we are made familiar with during the Soul Society arc, where we learn that he had dissected countless Quincy's, including Uryu's beloved grandfather. Despite being such a prominent character amongst the Gotei 13, his past still remains shrouded in mystery. Why was it that Mayuri was imprisoned within Maggot's nest? Why did the Soul Society allow Urahara to release him and then eventually become a successor to the Shinigami Research and Development Institute? In this video, I'm going to be deep diving into the past of Mayuri and discussing the possible scenarios that could have landed him into solitary confinement within one of the most infamous prisons within the Soul Society. Be sure to stick around until the end of this video, because I'll be discussing why the Gotei 13 had allowed him as the captain of the 12th Division to conduct sickening experiments without the regard of his test subjects. So without further delay, here is my breakdown as to why Mayuri was imprisoned within Maggot's nest. Within the current timeline of the story, Mayuri is the captain of the 12th Division, as well as the head of the Shinigami Research and Development Institute. But prior to holding these positions, he had served as the third-seated officer of the 12th Division under Kisuke Urahara. It was Urahara, in fact, who had arranged for him to be released from Maggot's nest during the Turn Back the Pendulum arc. Mayuri is first introduced to us in chapter 81 of the manga and in episode 24 of the anime, and he definitely has one of the most intriguing character designs out of all of the characters that I've seen in Bleach. His entire body, including his face and hands, have been painted white and black. His eyes are a golden color, and he constantly bares his yellow teeth, which makes it appear as though he is always laughing. Both of his ears are decorated with stubbed golden cones, and he appears to have painted his fingernails a shocking blue color, with the exception of the fingernail on his right middle finger, as it's extended and it appears like a talon. We know that Mayuri wasn't born with this appearance, because we actually do get a face reveal in chapter 172, which reveals that he has normal features and a regular skin tone. In all honesty, we've never really been given a rational explanation for his appearance, so my best guess would be that he does this to himself in order to enhance his persona of being an otherworldly, superior scientific genius. It's either this, or he just enjoys terrifying his subordinates and his enemies with his eccentric appearance. In addition to all of this bizarreness, his lieutenant Nemuri Nanago is always by his side. In chapter 642 of Bleach's final arc, we get to understand how Nemuri was created. In the manga panels, Akon explains that her real name was actually Nemuri No. 7, because she was an artificial soul project. After countless failures, it is revealed that when Nemuri No. 5 was created, the technology implemented by Mayuri was only able to create a fetus, and it was thanks to this technology that Mayuri was able to modify his Zanpakuto Ashisogi Jizo, and he had become a fully fledged captain of the Gotei 13. Akon explains to baby Nemu that she is Mayuri's greatest masterpiece, and it is through this detailed exposition that we get a solid insight into Mayuri's character, and we learn that he is in fact a dedicated scientist, and not just a sadistic individual. Upon deeper inspection, you learn that Mayuri goes through great lengths in order to preserve, create, and even destroy life, despite his methods being somewhat questionable, like his superhuman drug that he had used on xylopolograms, which had effectively slowed down his perception of time. So now that we've got a basic understanding of Mayuri and what he is capable of, it's time for us to theorize about the possible reasons as to why he may have been imprisoned within Maggot's nest. During the Turn Back the Pendulum arc, Maggot's nest is first revealed to us, and it's a prison under the jurisdiction of the Prison Squad, which belongs to the Covert Operations branch of the Onmitsukido. Located within the 2nd Division barracks, it is a prison for potentially dangerous individuals who have not necessarily committed committed any crimes yet. The prison is a wide open area where detainees are free to roam as they wish, but particularly dangerous individuals are imprisoned within cells. All guards or visitors must enter unarmed and be able to subdue any detainees with hand-to-hand combat alone. As the flashback arc continues, Urahara reveals to Hiyori that he had used to be a warden of Maggot's Nest. This was during his time within the Onmitsukido as the commander of the detention unit. His duties included imprisoning and supervising those who had committed crimes within the Serite. When Hiyori jokes around that his main duty was simply pushing criminals around, Urahara elaborates that he had other duties. In fact, he had to perform a duty called Special Management, which meant that he had to investigate, contain, and monitor Shinigami from the Gotei 13 whose belief or behaviors may pose a threat to the Shinigami or interfere with any ongoing missions within the Gotei 13. So his job was basically to find any dangerous individuals and to imprison them, which seems a bit unfair, but it's more of a preventative measure. What if the individual in question was just naturally gifted and wanted to further their knowledge? This understanding of how Urahara works perpetuates the idea that the Soul Society is an inherently corrupt and biased institution which imprisons individuals without fair cause. When we finally see the inhabitants of Maggot's Nest, the demeanor of the inmates really speaks volumes. They are dispirited and aimless as they wander around in an environment that lacks proper governance. The bleak setting that they reside within drives many of them crazy. Urahara sheds some light on an unsettling aspect of the Gotei 13's policies. None of the Shinigami are allowed to resign from their positions, and should they depart for a prolonged period of time, it is labeled as an expulsion, and they end up being put under special care. Urahara's philosophical approach is one that sees these so-called prisoners as assets, if only they can be provided with an environment that cultivates their talents. So now we understand just why Urahara had gone through such lengths in order to visit Maggot's Nest and to recruit Mayuri. We also know about the nature of those who are imprisoned within Maggot's Nest, and it's evident that they are confined mostly for unfair and unjust reasons. When we first see Mayuri during the Turn Back the Pendulum arc, we see that he has already started to develop eccentric tastes in regards to his fashion. His watered down version of his usual outfits is still intriguing to see, and unlike other prisoners, he is chained to the wall, as he is denoted as a man of high risk. A more important thing to note is that Mayuri had maintained his composure throughout the entire conversation with Urahara. Despite his moderately strange makeup, his way of speaking and talking is dignified and self-controlled, contrasted against many of the other prisoners who have already gone insane. This leads many fans to wonder, why on earth did the Soul Society deem him to be a threat? I want to now go over several possibilities as to why he may have been imprisoned. The first theory that I have is that at some point during his time within the Shinigami Academy, Mayuri had really excelled when it had come to his exams and had even surpassed his mentors. This is an institution which prepares Shinigami for entry into the Gotei 13, as well as training elite members for entry into the Kido Corps or the Onmitsukido. In chapter 592, we see that Mayuri is able to release a destructive form of Kido from the palms of his hand without making a sound. With this ability, he is able to blast holes through walls and to create protective barriers. It is possible that he was so advanced in his Kido techniques that he was simply deemed too much of a threat. We know that it takes 6 years of learning in order to join the Gotei 13. This includes knowing about Zanjutsu, Hoho, Hakuda, Kido, how to perform Konso, how to communicate with a Zanpakuto, as well as learning all of the general duties of a Shinigami. I think that Mayuri was on track to graduate earlier than some of his fellow comrades, but was instead sent to Maggot's Nest by superiors who were insecure over his success. The next likely reason that Mayuri may have been imprisoned was due to his antagonistic demeanor. This is frequently demonstrated whenever he speaks about Urahara. Literally, Urahara is the one man who lives rent-free within Mayuri's brain, and through his dislike for Urahara, we learn that he does not like competition. In chapter 381 of the manga, Ichigo states that if Mayuri is the second director of the Research and Development Institute, then he must have been Urahara's student. This simple remark was enough to send Mayuri into a fit of rage. He threatens Ichigo and promises to slowly and carefully immerse him into terror. Of course, this is meant by Kubo to be a light-hearted comedic moment, but it is very revealing nonetheless. Mayuri definitely has some sort of an inferiority complex when it comes to Urahara, and I don't doubt that while he was a student, he must have also antagonized his mentors. I can just imagine that he is someone who would have made numerous snide remarks about how he was far better than any of them, so maybe it was because of his attitude which had led him to be imprisoned. Though these first two scenarios methods do appear to be plausible, but they still don't explain why Mayuri's entire body was chained to a wall, which highlights that he was more of a threat than the ordinary prisoner within Maggot's nest. My third theory leans on the fact that Mayuri's Bankai Konjigi Ashisogi Jizo breathes a toxic gas which is a poisonous derivative of Mayuri's blood. Over the course of Bleach, we learn that a Bankai is a reflection of its owner's soul, so I'm guessing that Mayuri might have spent a large amount of his spare time mixing lethal doses, or he could have spent his time in the library reading about various concoctions which could harm or kill people. For a scientist, belief in the existence of perfection is not only limiting, but it is outright dangerous, and so it stands to reason that due to Mayuri's lingering curiosity, one of his mentors from the Shinigami Academy probably noticed his focus on one subject alone, realizing that this man is obsessed with poisonous chemicals, and deemed him to be a threat to the well-being of others, which, as you've already guessed, led him to be imprisoned. In chapter 122 and 123 of the manga, Mayuri exposes his deep love of experimentation on other races. This is the part of the story where Ichigo and his friends enter the Soul Society for the very first time in order to stop the execution of Rukia. When Mayuri fails to capture Orihime, he states that he will be able to find her if there is even a single strand of her hair left. This is extremely bizarre for the normal human mind to comprehend, but to complicate matters further, Mayuri happily states that he will study her until there is only human mincemeat left of her. To say that Mayuri is dedicated to his cause would be an understatement. I suspect that when he was given test subjects to study or work on during his time as a student, it may have led him to steal some body parts and to study them in secret, or he may have tried to steal a rare test subject that was forbidden for students to experiment upon within the Soul Society. This seems to be a common theme across fictional media. When we look into the history of anatomy, human anatomy was mainly acquired through books and animal dissection. Most mad scientist tropes are portrayed using one man who is eager for more knowledge and cannot stop himself from breaking the law by taking an actual human specimen in order to work on, despite this act being forbidden within society. For example, the study of anatomy in England at the height of the 18th and 19th centuries has been infamous for body snatching from graveyards in order to provide a sufficient supply of cadavers for the researchers to experiment on. So I don't think it would be too far out of the realm of possibility to speculate that perhaps Mayuri may have been incarcerated for a similar reason. In addition, during his battle against Uryu, Mayuri explains to the young Quincy that not only has he studied his kind thoroughly, but he has applied all manner of stimuli to their minds and bodies, and he has observed their responses. He goes as far as to proudly state that when he dissected them, crushed them, and studied them, in the end there was nothing left of the test subject, as he had turned them into a mass of flesh. This very horrifying exposition dump reveals to us a very grim side of Mayuri's character, and this is when he is first introduced to us. I do think that Mayuri may have acquired a taste for brutalizing his test subjects at some point before or after he had graduated from the Shinigami Academy. Now, because the Soul Society is a corrupt institution, he may not have been labeled outright as a criminal, because knowing the Soul Society, they may have been benefiting from the sickening research that he was conducting. But eventually, maybe the commanding officer of the detention unit had found it to be necessary to detain him based on all of his suspicious activity. What fascinates a lot of fans about Mayuri is his willingness to use his own body as a tool of research. The way that he easily modifies and experiments on himself is carefully illustrated by Kubo in chapter 121 when Uryu blasts off his arm extension. Mayuri only expresses slight disapproval of this act as he momentarily complains about the pain, but it appears as though he is more concerned with the time that it had taken him to set up his robotic arm extension. After he forcefully uses it, he takes out a flesh healing medicine which instantly regenerates his arm, taking Uryu by complete surprise. He also uses this again on Uryu and Renji after he defeats Xyloporo. This regenerative serum could be one of the many concoctions that Mayuri would have tested on himself and on test subjects in order to perfect. I can imagine that he secretly injected himself over and over again in the past, only to experience some severe side effects that were very difficult to ignore. He definitely has the mental capacity to do such a thing, which is proven by how he keeps his sanity while being imprisoned within Maggot's nest when Urahara visits him. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if Kubo one day reveals a backstory about Mayuri, which highlights a plethora of instances where he abuses his own body for the pursuit of his research. Maybe he was imprisoned because the Soul Society had deemed him to be a threat to himself. During Uryu's battle against Mayuri, he notices that the captain has a very unstable spiritual pressure. When we understand just how powerful captains are, we can imagine imagine that even as a young man 110 years ago, Mayuri possessed a significant amount of spiritual pressure. From what we know about the Maggot's nest, Mayuri was most likely imprisoned because he was seen as a threat in comparison to the other Shinigami near him, who most likely didn't have as much spiritual pressure as he did. This could be a very likely scenario because we see that he survives at the end of his battle against Uryu with nearly half of his body being blown off. I think any type of person who's capable of dissolving their body into liquid will be seen as really weird and maybe locked up without hesitation. Some of Mayuri's inventions are an excellent demonstration of his superior intellect. When Ichigo and the others invade the Soul Society, Mayuri uses his own subordinates as bait in order to lure out Orihime and Uryu into the open. The members of Squad 12 had no idea of the plans that their nefarious captain had for them, as Mayuri develops a special device known as a flesh bomb, which he secretly had implanted into their bodies. It was very heartbreaking to witness the deaths of these background characters, and it really led me to ponder over the probability that Mayuri may have done this in the past. Maybe it was because of his fascination with explosives and flesh, which had led to his superiors deciding that he needs to be imprisoned. One of his other notable inventions include Chair-sama, or in other words, the Reiatsu restraining material, which is able to withstand Hado 90 Kurohitsugi, which is casted by none other than Sosuke Aizen. I can imagine that Mayuri may have tested this out on other Shinigami in order to perfect the Reiatsu restraining properties of Chair-sama. Having speculated a plethora of reasons as to why Mayuri may have been imprisoned within Maggot's nest, it's time for me to explain how he had risen to the rank of captain of the 12th Division. During the Turn Back the Pendulum arc, when Urahara decides that he is going to create the Soul Society's Research and Development Institute and for it to be under the control of the 12th Division, he insists that he needs help from Mayuri. Urahara offers Mayuri the chance to be his assistant director on the condition that if Urahara dies, Mayuri would succeed him in rank and title, inheriting everything that he owns. This ultimately proves too tempting of an offer for Mayuri to refuse, and in all honesty, his acceptance of Urahara's offer doesn't mean that he considers him to be a friend or a leader. It was his only way out of confinement and he just took it. Mayuri struggles to understand the true nature and motivations of Urahara. Because of his front that he puts up with this light-hearted, joking facade, it makes it hard to read Urahara's motives, which makes it frustrating for an individual like Mayuri who refers to him as an irritating man. So after Urahara is exiled from the Soul Society, who was left to keep Mayuri in check? There wasn't anyone who was close enough with Urahara that could take up his position and to oversee Mayuri's actions. And I don't even think that the other captains of the Gotei 13 were aware of how dangerous of an individual Mayuri was after Urahara had brought him back into the Gotei 13. Urahara may have put Mayuri through the door, but the Soul Society had kept him in the room. Despite his research being horrific and disturbing, the Soul Society doesn't express any issue with Mayuri's actions. His lab is not a secret, and the other captains never really question his methods. If he comes into conflict with any of them, it's out of personal dislike rather than the immoral and unethical ways of experimentation that Mayuri does. Even morally just captains like Ukitake never show any disapproval of what Mayuri is capable of, and I guess that interfering with the running of his division is simply out of the question. Also, I think it's a matter of collectively looking the other way and ignoring the unpleasant aspects of his research while benefiting from the results of it. The moral ambiguity of the Soul Society isn't just unique to Mayuri. Later on in the manga, it is revealed that Akon was imprisoned within Maggot's nest during his childhood. I mean, what would warrant such treatment? He was just a kid. From all of the theories that I've spoken about, there is a common theme. It's most likely that Mayuri was imprisoned because of his curiosity. Mayuri most likely had known about the repercussions of his curiosity, but it's evident that he wasn't bothered as he prioritizes his science over personal comfort. Mayuri's passion lies in the endless journey of discovery as he rejects the very idea of an ultimate goal or perfection. While the Soul Society is usually depicted as the good guys, Mayuri's character blurs the line between good and evil. In the end, whatever the real reason may be, through everything that we learn about Mayuri's actions and his sickening experiments, it is evident that he was deserving of imprisonment. So we've now reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What did you think about Mayuri being imprisoned within Maggot's nest? Do you agree with any of my theories as to the reasoning behind his imprisonment? Do you have any of your own explanations that better explain this plot point that was left unanswered? I'd love to read all of your thoughts in the comments, so definitely continue the discussion. And lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Bleach video. A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then
check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more.
Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.